welcome back. I know it's been a little while. We're going to kind of do things a little bit differently. I usually talk about polyamory or veganism, but now we're going to start talking a little bit more about life, a little bit more about mental health, a little bit more about just the things that we don't necessarily discuss. I want us to talk more about being vulnerable. So today here I have my guest Olivia, and hi Olivia.
Hello.
We are going to talk about like our childhood, kind of talk about what it's like to have a mother that has borderline personality disorder and how that's kind of shaped our relationships currently, and how just in general how that has kind of our childhood has maybe somewhat stunted us a little bit in our growth, and that's just kind of what we're gonna kind of broadly go over a little bit. So when did you find out that your mother has personality disorder, borderline personality disorder?
So I found out kind of through my dad, who was the one that started researching like why she was the way she was. Basically about 5 years ago, when I was finishing up my freshman year of college, it kind of all, I guess I should start by saying my mom and I have always had a very complicated and explosive relationship, where I knew as a kid, I was pretty observant and in tune with her, and I knew the way that she treated me wasn't the way a mom was supposed to be treating her kid, but I couldn't identify exactly what it was, but it was just this sort of sense of she was relying on me for her happiness, and I really resented that, and I acted out, and the way I acted out was I became really enraged, and I would scream at her, but then she would scream at me, and it would escalate, and so our relationship was really explosive growing up. And it all kind of came to, I guess, the peak when my grandpa, my mom's dad, died very, very suddenly in 2017, which was the end of my freshman year of college. I ended up coming home for my grandpa's memorial, and my mom basically had a complete mental breakdown and ended up assaulting me in front of the whole family at the memorial service. And all the while she was going around at the memorial service and telling everyone that I was evil and saying things along the lines of it was my fault that my grandpa died. Just super confusing and horrible, and I was just so confused and angry and sad. But anyways, my dad told my mom it was over that same day. My dad did all this research and basically was the one that introduced me to the idea or the sickness that is BPD, and he's had his own sort of journey with it, and then I kind of continued researching it and understanding how it affected me. So I've known about it for probably 5 years or so, and I should say as well that I'm unsure if my mom actually has a diagnosis of BPD. My dad says that she does. My mom denies it. It's really hard to know what's true. But I know from my own research and what I've experienced and what other people of BPD parents have said, I know that a lot of the traits are very accurate for me. So I'm pretty sure that she has it, or at least traits of it. But understanding it has really helped me understand her as a person in our relationship. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, pretty recently. I went most of my childhood just really confused a lot of the time as to why she was acting the way she was, and like this anger I felt so deeply within me toward her.
Yeah.
But yeah, learning about it has made everything make a lot more sense.
It does. Learning about it helps you understand it now, but it doesn't erase what you've had to go through. And it's unfortunate that, anyone ends up with borderline personality disorder. It's not really in their control of how they developed it. So I do sympathize with them, but also things get done to people even if they don't mean it, and we are also a product of the repercussions of those decisions that come with their personality disorder. And it I think affects us with our childhood a great deal, because as you were saying, you don't know what's right or what's wrong or where the boundary is. It's kind of like you're kind of afraid to say anything to them because you're afraid that they're going to take it out of context, even no matter how much time, how you could spend hours trying to think of how to ask the question appropriately. And I don't think there really is a good way to ask the question, because somehow it always blows up into something else. So I think even that in itself, spending so much time ruminating on how to even ask a parent a question without them turning on you, that can affect you into your adulthood too. It makes it complicated and hard to, have boundaries. It makes it hard to speak up for yourself. It makes it hard for you to know what your worth is, and that you can be right, and a lot of the times that maybe we were disagreed with or argued with or belittled as younger versions of ourselves by these adults, we could have been right in those situations, but we won't really know. We just have to learn now as adults to see that they had a disorder, and that's something that they have to work on and take responsibility and ownership of. And then it's up to us as adults to take responsibility and ownership of correcting their behavior, correcting the way it affected us personally. We can't correct or fix them. That's on them to do. Yeah. But it's up to us to seek out therapy, have conversations with people with similar situations, and just seek out professional help to really learn to love ourselves and to really trust in ourselves, and that we know what is right and wrong, and what is, that what we have to say is important, and not, I think we second guess ourselves a lot because of it. So
definitely.
Yeah, my mom has a borderline personality disorder as well, and I was the youngest of four, and she just, I don't know, I didn't really have like a full we've talked about this earlier. You had your mom your whole childhood, whereas I was split between two households with my step-parents. My parents are still together, but I have half siblings, and I lived with my half brothers and their dad and his wife. So I was affected by my mother and her behaviors, but I also was affected by other factors that another set of adults didn't handle while they were growing up either. So that's what's so important about us acknowledging the issues we have and the behaviors we have now, because we don't want to make the same mistakes they did, and I don't want my children to have to go through this much questioning in themselves about life or where they stand or their value, or it's we're trying to put the work in now so that way the kids later don't have to put in as much work.
Yeah, breaking generational curses.
Exactly. So how do you think that having a relationship with your mother who has borderline personality disorder, how do you think that has affected your romantic and friend relationships?
So this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. It's the work I've been doing with my therapist, is like thinking about my current relationships as an adult and how it all for me, a lot of it really does tie back to a very difficult relationship I had with my mother. I've had a pattern with romantic relationships specifically. I'd say the past like 4 years or so since coming out, so not that long, I've had this series of like very like intense back-to-back romantic, like not monogamous, but for the most part, like just back-to-back pretty intense relationships that last around a year, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. And they're all pretty much characterized by me just kind of like letting them happen to me, if that makes sense, where I will meet people usually online, and I'm like kind of open to a lot of different personalities, and the other person is always the one that initiates like a monogamous relationship where they're like, let's be girlfriends, and I just kind of am like, okay. And so I just kind of let these relationships happen to me, and enough time goes by where around the like 8-month mark, I realize that I really am not happy anymore, and I feel that like so many of my boundaries have been crossed. I feel like I'm not being my genuine self. I feel like I really start to define myself by what I think that other person wants of me. So really a lot of like identity issues have come to the forefront for me, where I don't really have enough like I don't have like a strong enough sense of identity where I can go into a relationship knowing what I want, knowing what I expect of the other person. I just kind of will take like any attention I can get, which sounds really bad, but I know a lot of that has to do with the fact that I grew up with a mom who, when she was mad or upset with me or felt attacked by me, told me I was evil and a horrible person. And so I think the way that shows up in romantic relationships for me now is I'm actually very insecure, and I will kind of just take any attention I can get because I'm not sure, like I don't have enough confidence in myself where I feel like I'm even allowed to have standards. It's just like, this person's giving me attention, I should take any attention I can get, because deep down I have my mom's voice in my head calling me evil, you know. And yeah, it's really hard, because I think you have to go into a relationship with like a strong sense of self-worth and self-esteem for it to be healthy, so that you can set those boundaries that you need. But I have kind of just been entering relationships without that. So I'm on a break from dating for a while because of that. Yeah.
Well, I think like what you said about you take relationships because it's attention. And I feel like when you have a borderline personality disorder parent, it doesn't mean that there isn't any, like, I mean, it's different for each situation, obviously, but I mean, there was some positive moments, but, you know, most of the time it's a little chaotic, it's a little bit uncertain. And I think when somebody gives you, you know, attention, and it's somewhat positive, and it's about you and not how you've done things wrong, you really like that because you're not used to it. That's kind of positive. That person can have a lot of negative traits, but if they act in a positive way, you'll almost kind of ignore a lot of the red flags because you're not really used to it, I think. Used to being treated as somebody worthwhile, somebody who's one person who gives you their full attention. Like, that's hard. You don't get that a lot, at least for people like us, I guess, given the, you know, childhood circumstances.
It's confusing for me because I really like when someone's giving me attention, when it's very clear that someone likes me and is into me, especially like at the beginning of a relationship, I really like pull them in close and kind of like want them close, but then I will like start pushing them away at some point when I feel like things are getting really real. And I think that's why I was saying like at that 8-month mark where things start to potentially get like really serious, I know in my head that I've lost myself in that person. Or maybe I like haven't been showing my true self. I haven't been like totally vulnerable because I don't know exactly what that feels like to be totally vulnerable. And because I can feel myself like sort of like losing myself, at that point is when I start to push that person away. So it's this sort of like push pull relationship that is really confusing for me, and I think I always end up confusing the people I've dated because of that, because I start off really close and like intertwining myself with that person, and then I realize what I'm doing at some point, and I realize it's not healthy and that I should be focusing on myself, and then I just push them away. So yeah, it's very unstable.
I think it's good that we're acknowledging our own portion of a relationship, but it also takes two.
Mm-hmm.
So also we don't know what that other person's going through, and maybe they're not being equally vulnerable to you either. Like you said that you feel like you're losing yourself in these relationships, meaning, you know, your boundaries have been crossed, you've been kind of rebranded in some way to fit more of their lifestyle and be more, you know, fit more perfectly into their day-to-day life. That you know, that's not all you, like you have some choices obviously, but that kind of says a lot too, maybe about the person that you're choosing.
Yeah, maybe there's like a pattern to the people I'm attracting, where I tend to attract types that maybe will sort of cross my boundaries because they know they can.
Yeah,
in some ways.
And it sucks that it's easier for other people to identify the problem, but not yourself. Like, I know I do this all the time. Finding, if my friend were to tell me a certain story about somebody, I'd be like, what is, obviously they're doing you wrong. You deserve way better than that. But if I put myself in their shoes, for some reason, it's not that crystal clear. It's not that black and white. It's very gray and murky, and I don't understand why. I think we kind of discussed this earlier, not on the video, but at lunch today, that, you know, we have to be somewhat truthful with ourselves about why we stick around in these relationships or put up with these kinds of behaviors. Because I think that even though we struggle to have confidence, I think that deep down we do have some knowledge and believe, maybe not strongly, but we do believe that we deserve better, and that we are valuable. But somehow we still ignore because we don't want to acknowledge, maybe, that we've decided to let people push us over.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, and the way it comes up for me too is I'll like ignore that feeling of my boundaries being crossed over and over. But then at some point, that, like you're saying, that knowledge was always there at some, like throughout the whole time, that like, oh, I don't like what you did, but I just repress things so much that I don't even realize like when I'm feeling that. But then at some point, it's built up enough where I'm really resentful toward the person and like not even attracted to them, that I just kind of like end it very suddenly. And it's usually really surprising for the other person. Like historically, I've just kind of like ended things because I've had enough sort of just like built up unhappiness. It's not even that they like did anything wrong necessarily. It's just like I wasn't feeling happy, and I was letting things build up to a point where I'm just like kind of done with it toward the end. And it's like almost a relief to get out of relationships at that point. So
I'm kind of the opposite. Like, I don't like when relationships end, but also another thing we discussed is that I have a separate, like two different parental situations and living situations growing up that I split to, one a little more time in the other than being with my borderline personality disorder mother and my very quiet, timid dad. I also was with my step parents, which doesn't make sense to the general population, but they were my step parents. They, you know, were alcoholics and very, it was very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just stressful, a very stressful environment, very violent. Like, not necessarily was anyone getting, physically abused, at least from what I was seeing. But like that, having that is, I think there's some similarities in like what we think we deserve, but also because of this other situation, this other parental setup that I had. For me, I don't like relationships ending because I was codependent on my stepmother more so than I was in having a relationship with my bio mother who has the borderline personality disorder. So
you got like kind of two different perspectives in a way.
Yeah. So you were like, well, I need to cut them out because I'm not being validated anymore. They're changing me. I'm resenting them because one, you're maybe not bringing it up and you just letting it boil until the last straw, and then boom.
Yep.
Over. Whereas I, on the other hand, I might not want to confront them because I'm worried they're gonna leave. They could be. I feel like somebody has to really do me dirty for me to be the bigger person and be like, I deserve way better than this. I'll wait. For me, it's the opposite. I'll wait, and then eventually they are the ones who leave. I feel like.
Yeah, and then for me, it's just like it just starts to feel like too much, but it starts to feel like the kind of way that I tend to like intertwine with people in relationships, and it gets really intense way too fast, and we don't take things slow enough. That just feels like too much for me, and then I just end it. It's kind of suddenly, without really having brought it up over time, bringing up the issues over time. And so, yeah, we're kind of the opposite in that way. We react differently to intimacy. And it's interesting, too, because my full brother, who also grew up in the same household, same parents and everything, he had a very different reaction where he's super codependent and is very much like the one who feels like he needs to comfort everyone and will stay in relationships, always comforting my mother, doesn't speak up, is very emotionally repressed. So he had sort of the opposite reaction to me, whereas I was like the angry one growing up who knew it was really messed up what was happening and like yelled and got into screaming fights with my mother. And now I'm just like, relationships are fun at first and then they just start to feel way too intense and I just cut out.
And I think what you said there about your brother being a little more codependent is like, though we have these borderline personality disordered mothers, that doesn't mean the relationship is one way for across the board, because you could have been the one who's getting attacked verbally or mentally, and then he could have been the like golden child in a way.
That's how it was.
And I'm the youngest of four, and I'm the only girl, and I think that's in some ways played to my advantage in some ways growing up, because I was the only one and they wanted a girl, and I was able, it seemed like all the parents no one got left out of getting a little scorned or, traumatized in some variation. But I definitely was not so much more attacked as I was the one going between all the different parties in the family, all the family members, and trying to make sure everyone's story got told. I was very much like consoling my mothers and trying to help others understand why their bad behaviors were brought on in the first place. Like, I felt my job was to smooth things out after every bump or every explosion happened. So that's another reason why my experience compared to my brother's my three brothers experience may be drastically different. In like, I'm way more codependent on, say, my stepmother, and my twin brother. For instance, I have a twin brother. He's I feel like he is more codependent on our borderline personality disordered mother. Me, not so much. My codependency is on my stepmother, but that's changed over the years. But it's like, it really just kind of depends on like how that person, how they treated each individual differently.
Yeah.
So his experience was different. He was, like I said, maybe he was a little bit more of the golden child. He might have not have gotten away with a lot of things like no one does, but it might have been like a little less severe, you know?
Yeah, my mom definitely took out the most on me. I think because I was he's my only brother, so there's me and him. I'm older too, and the only girl, so I think my mom really like took it out on me the most. Whereas my brother, he was very much the one kind of filling the role that it sounds like you filled, where he was trying to like make everything okay. And I think he would just like retreat when my mom and I would start fighting and just like hide in his room to escape it all because it was too much. Whereas I was just like more outwardly angry. Like my therapist said, there's always one kid in the family who like holds all the anger for the family, and that was definitely me. And he is a lot more passive. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that I had that, I was the angry one, because I think I've done a lot of work to like work through all the shit that happened to me and affected me like so greatly. And I'm glad I didn't repress anything, but it's still like the way it affects my relationships is very real. Like I think I have sort of a disorganized attachment now, because it's this weird like push-pull of pulling people close, but then pushing them away when the intimacy starts to feel too real, when I start to feel like I could get too vulnerable, and I'm afraid of what they're gonna see, and I'm afraid of what I'll show, because I have this voice in my head that's my mom telling me I'm a horrible person and that I'm evil.
Thanks again for sharing with us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And as always, you guys feel free to follow me here on YouTube. You can follow me on my handle on Instagram is Tempting Saitan. You can find me on most platforms, but I'm mostly active on Instagram. So I hope I see you guys next week. I'm going to be bringing in more people to interview, and we're going to be really kind of stepping things up and changing how we post these videos, what kind of content we're having. It's no longer just about polyamory. Polyamory is still going to be a topic, but we're talking about life, mental health, people's experiences. I want everyone to feel involved and be able to share. So tune in next week, okay? Bye!